Hi, everyone. I'm Katie McLean, and I'm the CEO of Tusk Hub. And today we're here talking about the growth movement, which is a movement that brings people together around the idea of sustainable growth and the steps to it. Today we're speaking to Chris Taylor. He's the founder of Actionable. Welcome, Chris. Today we're going to talk about measuring progress. So why don't you just take a few minutes, Chris, and introduce yourself to us and what Actionable does?
That's my 3-year-old. Sure. Thank you for having me on. This is great, and one of my favorite topics being growth and measurement being a key component of it. So I'm based in Toronto, Canada. We work through Actionable.co. We work globally, predominantly with consultants and client organizations in the U.S., Australia, the U.K., as well as Canada. And our primary focus is to assist growth in organizations that are looking to transition, pivot, scale. Anytime there's really a foundational change to the organization's direction, Actionable can play a part in that. And the role that we play through both our technology platform and through some of the consulting work that we do is around helping to create cohesion and alignment within an organization where individuals have had the time and space to find their own personal connection to the strategic direction of the organization, and then to take action in a way through small behavior change steps that is both personally rewarding, where they feel they are growing and developing, and is in alignment with where the organization needs them to be behaving in order to make that change happen. So it's a lot of fun. We work with companies of all sizes and in all different industries.
That sounds amazing. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about sort of your Habit Builder product and how it helps to measure the impact of the consulting work that you do and the educational work that you do.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think measurement's such an interesting topic because for many people, measurement goes to compliance around are the things that we need people to do being done, are the systems operating the way that we need them to operate. And there's an element of that, and of course there's a time and a place for compliance-based measurement. Excuse me. But our focus is really around using excuse me, using measurement as a leading indicator of where the strategy is likely to succeed or fall down on its current trajectory early enough in the process that something can be done about it. So that's sort of our overarching philosophy around measurement, is that yes, there's compliance, but there's also leading indicators around what's working and what's not from a behavior change standpoint. So our Habit Builder product, which is sort of an element of the actionable change methodology, is really designed as a vehicle to help individuals take that personal motivation that they have to want to make change happen because they have had the time and space to find personal relevance in the strategic direction of the company, so that great intention that people feel at the end of a town hall or at the end of a team meeting or at the end of a facilitated session. We've all had that feeling where it's like, yes, there's great intention. I want to do something with this. And of course we leave that sort of space and start to have that intention eroded by external factors, external people that maybe aren't in the same alignment with us. And we've probably all been in that position where 2 weeks later, it's sort of a happy memory, but not a lot has changed. So what the Habit Builder is designed to do is to crystallize with individuals what their intention is, to equip them with the tools and reminder systems, nudges, support systems to actually make that behavior change happen over time, to do it in a way that is highly visible to the rest of the team and the organization. So the measurement component around it is really a byproduct of that, where it's around being able to provide to senior leadership insight into what resonates with people. How are they planning on applying it? What do they imagine the barriers to be? And as they go about engaging in that tricky task that we refer to as change, how are they tracking? Our focus within Actionable is very much a level of self-assessment and peer validation, as opposed to compliance around is the behavior change happening from a tactical standpoint. It's around the mindset shift, the growth shift of are the individuals leaning into and finding traction in the behaviors that they're working to realize. All that to be said, from a tactical standpoint, the Habit Builder is extremely light, easy to use, couple seconds a day for individuals. and managers can use it as a coaching tool with their team because they have deeper understanding through the platform around what people are trying to change and where they might be getting stuck. So managers can support them through that.
I like that it's customized to the individual so that they can find their own purpose within what they were taught in the session, or what strategic change is going to happen with the company.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much more meaningful than sort of that top down, you should do this. It's pretty hard to motivate people to kind of continue on with that strategy if they don't find their own meaning within it. So that sounds like a really cool product. I have tried it. It is pretty neat.
Far too often, Katie, we hear really well-intentioned CEOs saying, I told them why this is important. I've told them 17 times why this is important. I don't know why they're not getting it. It's like, well, maybe it's because you're telling them why it's important as opposed to asking them why it's important to them. There's it's simple and a bit tongue in cheek, but it's a fundamental shift of, are you trying to reinforce your why, right? Or are you inviting them to find their own version of that why in actually moving that forward? It becomes a heck of a lot easier when you go the second path.
That's perfect. And it's actually, obviously I have a background in sales, but that's exactly what you do when you're meeting with clients. Is you're not telling them why they want your product. You're finding their why within the product is the most meaningful way to help people sort of adopt your product. So what does sort of, when you're talking about leveraging data to understand where change is happening, so what kinds of things can you do to see, like measure it along the way as to whether the change is effective?
Yeah, so we really look at sort of three primary lenses around behavior change data. So first of all, there's sort of content resonance. So based on what you've shared with people in the organization, how is it landing for them? Do they believe that it is important to them? Do they believe that they have the tools and the support to actually action something within that? So that content resonance, did they understand it? Did it connect with them sort of more emotionally than just cerebrally? So that's piece one, and it's more static in the sense that you may get an update on that every month or so through a platform like Actionable. The second is around intended application. So based on what they heard, what are they planning on doing with it? This layer of data becomes extremely insightful because they may have understood it, they may have internalized it, but then they've taken a sharp right turn compared to what your expectations were on how they would apply it. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's this just really powerful insight that can come from it where you go, oh, fascinating. I hear people really buzzing about this, but they're taking it in a totally different way than I expected. And as a leader of an organization, how do I either course correct that by providing them with new insights so they can see maybe the bigger picture, or how do I leverage that? If they're already going sort of that way and it's only 3 degrees off of what I expected as opposed to 90 degrees, how do I sort of incorporate that and think ahead of their activity to how that's going to benefit the whole? So that second layer becomes really fascinating, the intended application. And then the third is actual application and realized barriers. So this is where the habit builder, which captures data on a daily basis around an individual, team, and organization, can start to provide really useful leading indicators of, if box 1 was checked, yes, they understood it the way I sort of envisioned it. 2, they intended to take action roughly aligned with what I expected. But 3, they're really getting stuck because of factors X, Y, Z, or Z, depending on where you're based. There's opportunity to see that 3 days after they've made a commitment and started their behavior change process, as opposed to 30, 60, 90 days later when it's showing up in our KPIs internal, right? So what we find is that the ability to respond in real time as a leader using living data around where people are getting stuck, where they're having wins, who's having wins, can we highlight those bright spots? That insight and then leveraging that insight can become a really powerful tool in ensuring that you don't become sort of that statistical norm of 70% of change initiatives failing, right? So it's that iterative improvement that can come through seeing how people are actually applying and where they're getting stuck.
That's crazy, that 70% number, Chris. Like,
yeah,
I could see how it could happen though. Like really, it's a long process to, in a way, to create change, lasting change, sustainable change. So you're sort of distinguishing between data and insight
Yeah.
all along when you're speaking. Can you just sort of elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, this is one of my my personal sort of platforms or soapboxes for anyone that will listen. I mean, data has been a big mantra for most industries, but particularly in HR in the last 10 years, HR, L&D, there's been this move to more data. And data is great, right? But data is figures that will fit inside cells on a spreadsheet. It doesn't tell the whole story. It's not dissimilar to an RFP where it's like, fill in this box exactly right. Like, I can answer that, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. There's a real importance, I believe, a real value that can be created when we take the data as, you know, great evidence of what's happening, but then bring a level of understanding and other inputs, whether it's anecdotal, whether it's emotional themes you see in the organization, and start to layer context onto that data. Data is static. If we take it and you know, the recent sort of COVID scenarios and the various stances people have taken around whether we should or should not have gone into lockdown, people reference data all the time, but they use the data that they want in order to sort of justify their point on both sides, right? And I'm not passing judgment on one view or the other, but there's a real risk when we say, well, the data says this. The data doesn't say anything, right? The data is right. It's an artifact that you can use. Insight is when you layer that that more sort of holistic view of how the data fits into what else you're seeing. And I think, yes, I tend to bounce quickly between data and insight in my sort of unpacking of things. But the insight comes when we've considered what that data means in context to our overarching objectives. It's the art and science of it, I would say.
Oh, that's a good explanation of it, actually. I mean, you
Nice.
see, you know, data is a point in time as well, right?
Yep.
And unless it's incredibly recent and nothing has changed since, it may or may not be relevant. So those insights can obviously make a big difference. So can you give me an example when a leader has measured, or sorry, leveraged an insight to measure in the past?
Yeah. What I love about it is that it's similar to data. The use of data and that insight is also that moment in time, right? So what we see as being, and I'll give you specific examples in a second, but the most effective use of actionable and really sort of the change methodology that we subscribe to, we call it the heartbeat, is when it's built into sort of an operating rhythm where the data is flowing, we're using it to, and then layering on external context around that data so we can have insight today that we can take action on, probably not sweeping action, but rather the next iteration of content that's going to go through to the organization, et cetera, and keep that cycle going. So where we've seen that work really well is on those longer term engagements where there's a multi-year strategic plan that's been rolled out. There's a client group we're working in Canada, about 1,200 employees is the full company. And they have a fairly fundamental shift that they want to make over the next 3 years as far as how they show up in the market, how their clients perceive them, even some of their supply chain decisions and product lines, distribution channels. The mechanical components of the business need to change fairly foundationally. And this company's been around for a very long time. Many people there have been there for a very long time. And there can be, as we've probably most experienced, there can be that, well, what we've done has worked. I don't know why we need to engage in these wide sweeping changes, right? So when that client started to share out their strategic plan, they did what most clients do, which is they did the town hall with the CEO sort of unveiling the strategic plan. Great fanfare, probably not confetti cannons, but that's what's in my head, right? Just like, new plan. And then well-intentioned HR and L&D then started rolling out content, lots of content, right, to the community. People used the words, right, that were in the strat plan, but there wasn't a lot changing from an actual activity standpoint. When they started actually using the actionable process to bring conversations to teams. So part of what we do aside from the habit builder is give team leaders tools to have discussions around very small pieces of that bigger plan. What we found going through that process was that by department, there was a lack of, well, there's a couple of things. One, there was a lack of trust, not in the intentions of leadership, but in the, is this actually going to be our thing for the next 3 years? Or is it, we're launching it now and 6 months from now it'll be something else?
Right.
So that showed up very quickly in the data around, yeah, I get it cerebrally, right? Am I buying in? Yeah, I get it. Like I see, I connect to it. I understand how this will be good for me, but I don't know if it's actually going to stick. So I'll just sort of hold off for a few months and see, right?
I think I've done that before, actually.
Well, I think a lot of us do. We get fatigued, right? It's like, is this actually, we're all changing and everything all the time. And so is this something I actually need to engage in or not? And so what was fascinating about that was that senior leadership, seeing that, were able to stay the course longer, right? In that case, they didn't make any foundational changes to the content that was going to go to the group. They kept beating the same drum,
Mhm.
right? So that over the course of the next few months, the rest of the organization was able to go, okay, we're doing this, and able to sort of lean in and actually then start to engage in the process. And we saw that behavior change engagement just go, I don't know which direction I'm going, up and to the left, up and to the right, as far as people engaging in the change. And so I found that really fascinating because the reality was different than what leadership assumed was the case. They're not doing anything because they don't agree with this, was the philosophy. And we need to look at doing some major staffing changes. That wasn't the case at all. It was, they're tired and they've been comfortable. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to get them engaged in the change than what was expected. And we could see that quickly to allow senior leadership to stay the course.
Yeah. And again, allowing them or helping them to find their why inside the change, I could see could have a great effect, especially if you could, continue to measure and gain insights from, how they're adopting to the change or to the new strategy or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, well, this has been really amazing, Chris. Thank you. I learned a lot about insights and data and how to create sustainable change. And I think that fits really well into the growth movement as far as making sure that, if it's a product adoption, if it's a strategy adoption, sort of all of the mechanisms are the same, really. So thanks for all of your insights today, Chris.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.